Aditya, can you hear me? Again, you are on mute, Mr. Rajan.
Yes, sir. We are asking him to unmute, sir.
You are on mute. Yes, now it is okay. Good
Morning.
morning.
See you again.
Good to see you after such a long period.
Lovely seeing you. But I've been following all your programs and following all your wonderful achievements, Mr. President. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Very, very unprecedented.
Thank
compared
you.
to any other chamber.
Thank you. How are you, Mr. Chaudhary? Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Very good.
How are you? Everyone's up. All well?
Everyone, welcome. Good morning. Everything's fine. Nepal, obviously, as you are aware, is in a complete lockdown, especially Kathmandu.
It's gone down.
Good morning,
Yes, sir.
President sir. Good morning,
Hello, Saurabh, how are you?
Good morning, Nirvana ji. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Very, very warm welcome to all of you.
Just won the gold in chess, Nirvana ji.
Namaste everybody, namaste, Swarup sir, namaste.
How are you?
Namaskar ji.
Namaste.
Namaste ji, namaste. Dr. Vinod.
Vinod ji, Dr. Vinod. Good morning to you.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Sir, good morning.
Good morning ji. So, do we have Mr. Adhikari?
Yet
to join, okay.
Yes, Mr. President, I am here.
Yeah, good morning.
Very good morning.
Adhikari has come.
Good morning. Yeah. Excellency, Dr. Rajan, good morning. How are you, sir?
Seeing you again. Good morning to you.
Nice meeting you in this. Vinod ji, how are you?
Namaste. I'm fine, thank you, sir.
Very good morning, Adhikari ji. I am Saurabh Sanyal.
Saurabh sir, good morning. Very good morning. How are you?
Yes, sir. How are you, sir? We met
Fine.
3 years back.
Yeah.
3 years back in Nepal.
Yeah, we met last time.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Namaskar. I am Sanjay Agarwal.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
We
How
have
are you,
our
sir?
former president, Mr. Anil Khetan, with us. Good
Morning.
Khaitan ji.
Namaskar.
Morning, DKG. Morning,
Good morning to everybody, sir.
Morning. Good morning, Madam Kala. How are you?
Namaskar, how are you, sir?
Madam Kalra, good morning. Kala, yes, sorry.
Adhikari ji ko
Good morning,
namaskar.
sir.
Pranam, sir. I am Sanjay Agarwal. I am the Senior Vice President of PSD Assembly.
Very good morning. Pranam, Sanjay sir.
Pranam, that's it.
Atrey sir, namaskar. Rajan sir.
Morning, sir. Morning.
Morning, Saurabh ji.
Good to see you again. Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Bhattagar. Good morning.
Good morning, Bhattagar ji. Good morning, sir. Hi, Nirvan. How are you?
Hello.
I think all our guests have joined. So if, now we can start.
Thank you. Mr. President, with your permission,
Yes, please.
can we begin?
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir. Please start, sir.
Let's start, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great privilege for the India-Nepal Center to welcome all of you, and especially our guests from Nepal and our senior leaders from the PhD chamber. The subject that we are discussing today is obviously of a very importance, considering the damage that is being done to the economy of the entire region by the COVID-19 crisis. I think on every front, both our countries are suffering very seriously. The MSME sector is of critical importance to the economy from every point of view, but it is the first sector that is that is taking a hit already. We can't quantify the extent of the damage that is being done, but it is going to be extremely serious. And the World Bank estimates, for example, that the entire South Asian region is going to be set back by possibly several decades on an average. And in one sense, we will have the lowest growth rate in about 40 years, according to the World Bank. And then countries like Nepal are going to be particularly seriously hit because they depend so much on remittances, on tourism, and small industries. So unemployment, inflation, from every point of view, Nepal is also going to suffer. In India, as our Nepalese friends would know, the government has been taking the MSME sector very seriously, giving it the highest priority, and a number of very important far-reaching reforms have been announced by the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and I think we will go into them in greater detail now and depend on our senior leaders from the PhD to brief us on what exactly is happening in India. But I do want to emphasize that the spirit in which India is doing this, we talk about self-reliant India, Skill India, Make in India, etc. But the spirit in which it is being done is, as I think one of our senior BJP leaders mentioned just the other day, the spirit in which this is being done is that we in South Asia can grow together. So whatever positive things are happening in India, it is really available to the entire region so that we can all grow together. We do realize that India's recovery from COVID-19 is going to be incomplete unless we can carry much of the neighborhood along. And this is particularly true of Nepal, with which we have such unique relations. So we will depend on our Nepalese friends to give us an idea about what their priorities are, what their needs are. Let us compare what the best practices are in both countries and see how best we can help each other. But I think we cannot afford to delay. Time is not on our side. So with these few words, I really want to request leaders on both sides to have as meaningful an interaction as possible today so that we can see a way forward for a more focused interaction, for a more focused, in-depth study of what exactly are the priority areas in the MSME sector in which the PhD, which is really the leader in the country as far as expertise, knowledge, and experience in the MSME sector is concerned, how the PhD, which is the only chamber in the country which has an India-Nepal center, can make its services available to Nepal for mutual benefit. So Nirvanji, with those few words, I would like to pass the floor on to you. Please do tell us about this particular aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Saab, for your introduction and welcome to everyone. I would like to firstly welcome our chief guest, Governor of the Central Bank of Nepal, Shri Mahaprasad Adhikari ji. Also our various representatives from the Indian Embassy, Government of India, the CEO of the Board of Nepal, our dearest colleagues and friends from PhD chambers, and as well as my colleagues from CNI, as well as all the participants who are listening to this very, very important topic we're discussing today on MSME, which obviously in Nepal, like I'm sure in India, constitutes a large contributor to the GDP and has the maximum employment in the country's workforce. I think the key in Nepal was access to finance for the MSME, and I must give full marks and huge credit to the way Central Bank, under the leadership of our chief guest, came up with such favorable and positive policies, which pretty much firstly prioritize the MSME sector. It was very welcomed by the private sector and the MSME sector in Nepal during the stimulus package and monetary policy that was announced in Nepal by the central bank, which focused largely on access to finance to the MSME sector, obviously knowing the importance of this to the economy. In general, I think it has been really well appraised, but obviously there's a lot we need to learn. We have a lot of, without doubt, the relation that Nepal and India share in terms of trade and economy is immense. And I'm sure with all the participants over here who are leaders in their own fields, we'll be able to learn and obviously get more perspective as to what's happening in our own country as well. So without further ado, we've got some great speakers with us today. We'll be able to get some great perspective. I would like to firstly request the president of PhD CCI, Dr. D.K. Agarwal, to please share a few words with us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. Good morning to all. On behalf of PhD Chamber of Commerce, I extend a very warm welcome to our chief guest today, Shri Mahaprasad Adhikari ji, who is the governor of Nepal Rashtra Bank. I also welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Sushil Bhatta, CEO of Investment Board, Nepal. I welcome another guest of honor, Mr. Kapi Dhwaja Pratap Singh, who is the commercial representative of Indian Embassy in Nepal. Welcome to Mr. Anukul Bhatnagar, who is MD and CEO of Nepal SBI Bank. Welcome to our former president, Mr. Anil Khetan, who has been, it was he who took this initiative of setting up India-Nepal Center. And I think ours is the only chamber which has this India-Nepal Center and working towards promoting the trade and commerce between the two countries. My welcome to our session chair, Ambassador Mr. K.V. Rajan, who is also the chairman of this India-Nepal Center from India. Also session co-chair, Mr. Nivana Chaudhary, who is also chairman of India-Nepal Center from Nepal, and also Vice President CNI, Managing Director of Chaudhary Group. Mr. Madhav Lal, former Secretary, Ministry of MSME, Government of India. And my warm welcome to my colleague, Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, Senior Vice President. And I must also tell that Mr. Sanjay Agarwal is going to take over as the President after this 30th September. So it is good that he is part of today's deliberation. Mr. Pradeep Multani, our Vice President, PhD Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Ashutosh Bhardwaj, Managing Director, Noview Manufacturing Private Limited. Dr. Binod Atriya, Managing Director, BFIN. Mrs. Praveen Kala, Director, Paramount Cables Private Limited, and also ex-banker, former CGM, SBI. Mr. Saurabh Sanyal, our Secretary General, PhD Chamber of Commerce. Friends from industry from both India, Nepal. Friends from media from both India, Nepal. Other participants to today's webinar. Again, a very warm welcome to today's very, I'll say, power-packed panel, the who is who from Nepal as well as from India. So today's session on enhancing cooperation for MSMEs in Nepal, I'm sure is going to be very productive, very interactive, and there would be a lot of actionables coming out of it. With this, I come back to the topic of today's enhancing cooperation for MSMEs in Nepal. As Ambassador K.V. Rajan also pointed out, we share a very unique relationship with Nepal. It is not only that we have a shared open border of over 1700 kilometers, but the relationship which we share with Nepal is kind of roti-beti relationship. The relationship dates back to the cultural relationship, social relationship, economic relationship based out of devotional, religious. I mean, this is a very, very unique relationship which we enjoy. If you forget this border, you cannot differentiate between the cultures of these two countries. So that is the kind of bonding we have, the people-to-people connect we have with Nepal. And when in these post-COVID time, when both the countries are facing the worst in the century crisis of health crisis as well as economic crisis, whereas Ambassador K.V. Rajan pointed out that in last 40 years, we have not seen this kind of economic degrowth, which we are going to see this year. It is both for India as well as for Nepal. World Bank has said that India is going to grow, degrowth is going to be around 1.5 to 2.5%. Nepal is going to, there's going to be a degrowth of around 3.5 to 4.5%. How the actual figures would pan out, the time would tell. But one thing is sure that it is a huge crisis. And in case of particularly Nepal, when we had, the earthquake, and then we had the worst flood of the decade, and now this COVID. So the MSME sector, which is the lifeline of Nepal, which is contributing almost 70% to the exports, 80% to the employment and 90% to the industrial GDP of Nepal. In such a situation where MSME, more than 3,25,000 MSMEs from Nepal are there, which are registered MSMEs. Then there are unregistered MSMEs in the informal sector, which is also a huge number. So how we can support, because we at India, we have a neighborhood first policy. We have a shared growth, shared prosperity policy. So as a country, as a PSD Chamber of Commerce, what we can do to make sure that we enhance the cooperation to support the MSMEs in Nepal, because we believe that this is our responsibility, and it is for the mutual benefit of both the countries. It is for the mutual benefit both of the SME sector of both the countries. And we at PSD Chamber, we would like to assure that whatever needs to be done to support the MSMEs in Nepal, as a chamber, as the president of this PSD Chamber of Commerce, I can assure you that we will do our best. We, as I said, our mentor, our former president, Mr. Anil Khetan, who was instrumental in setting this India-Nepal Center. I'm sure this India-Nepal Center can do a lot of things. This center is, already doing the job of hosting delegations from Nepal, as well as when the Indian delegation goes to Nepal, our INC Nepal chapter, they host this thing. So I'm sure that a lot can be done. And now, since this is a COVID time, maybe the physical hosting of these delegations may not happen. So I'm very happy to inform you that PSD Chamber has developed a very robust platform. It has created a platform where we can host virtual conference, virtual exhibitions, virtual expos, and it's a very, very robust platform. We have been holding these kind of expositions, exhibitions, day in, day out since this COVID-19 started. And almost 30 such conferences, such exhibitions, where number of participants, even in one conference, more than 10,000 members participated. So I would request our this India-Nepal Center to host these kind of exhibitions, where the MSME sector from Nepal, they can showcase their capabilities, their products, and Indian counterparts, they can take interest in those. And there could be a lot of collaborations, joint ventures, a lot of orders which can flow, a lot of technology transfer which can happen, and mutual support in whatever way it is possible, that should happen. Then this was one thing which I wanted to highlight. Then also we have a MSME mentoring and facilitation center, which is again mentored by our former president, Mr. Anil Khetan. And he has been taking very active interest in mentoring, in supporting the MSMEs from India, whether it is in terms of access to finance, access to market, access to support in terms of registering the patents, copyrights. So whatever support is required for MSME, whatever guidance, creating awareness about various policies of government, so that MSME sector, which is not aware of these policies, they can take benefit, doing policy advocacy for the MSME sector. And I'm happy to tell you that PSD Chamber of Commerce is the only apex chamber which has almost 90% of its members coming from MSME sector. So we are in a position to support MSMEs, and this India-Nepal Center and this MSME Mentoring and Facilitation Center, which is mentored by our former President, Mr. Anil Khetan, I'm sure they can provide huge support to MSMEs in Nepal. I will not take much time because, as I said, we have who is who from Nepal. We have the central bank governor of Nepal. We have the MD of SBI from Nepal. We have the chairman and managing director of the investment board from Nepal. So with so many galaxy of speakers and so many powerful people here, I'm sure that we have more to hear from them. We would like to be guided. What are the ways? What are the areas where we can support? And I'm sure that we at PSD Chamber are committed to supporting the MSMEs of Nepal. With this, I close here. Welcoming you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agarwal, for your insight as well as a macro level view on the importance and focus we need to give for MSME sector in whole. Obviously, PhD CCI has such a such an amazing secretariat led by Mr. Saurav Sanyal, Atulji, that we're constantly talking at our chambers level on doing few activities, and we'll definitely take advantage of the new technology platform that you have established. From CNI's initiative in the India-Nepal Center also, we have, I'll be talking a little bit more in the conversation, but we have just managed to put together a union of Asian chambers, putting together all the chambers in the region together under one platform. So I hope that will also help a lot of us to improve and increase the bilateral activities that is going on. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanjay Agarwal. Congratulations for be taking in a very important role in the near future. Sir, please, over to you for your small remarks on this topic, please. Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, the Senior Vice President of PhD CCI.
You're on mute, Sanjay ji.
Thank you, Nirvana ji. It's really a privilege for me to be addressing such a galaxy of stalwarts in the Indo-Nepal, economic space, where we have such eminent panel today, which will enlighten us. It's my real pleasure and privilege to welcome Sri Mahaprasad Adhikari ji, Governor of the National Nepal Rashtra Bank, the guest of honor, Sri Sushil Bhattaji, CEO, Investment Board, Nepal, and our distinguished guests, Mr. Kapidhwaj Pratap Singh ji, Commercial Representative, Embassy of India in Nepal, and Mr. Anukul Bhatnagar, MD and CEO of Nepal SBI Bank, our own former President, Mr. Anil Khaitan, former President PSDCCI, of course, our President, Dr. D.K. Agarwal, who has been the spearhead of the Indo-Nepal cooperation during this past year, which has seen so much activity and two major conferences between our CNI and PSD through the good offices of our Indo-Nepal chamber. I think I must again grateful to our session chair, Ambassador K.B. Rajan, who has been the main force guiding us and the main force leading to this extremely important cooperation between India and Nepal, for which our chamber and CNI have become the spearheads. I think this is something very very positive that we are doing, both our chambers. Of course, Mr. Nirvana Chaudhary, the Vice President of CNI and Chairman India Nepal Center, and all our esteemed panelists. I might have missed out a few names, so kindly excuse me for that. I would like to acknowledge, of course, Mrs. Praveena Kala, who has honored us by being on the board of our company also, and she has been the Chief General Manager of SBI. So it's a privilege to have such an esteemed panelists and participants today. On behalf of PSDCCI and on my own, I express my heartfelt thanks for for all of you joining us to consider the impact of COVID pandemic and the steps that our industries in India and Nepal can together take to reduce, to face this challenge, and at the same time to work positively and find out more and more positive solutions. I would also like to appreciate the invaluable contribution while representing the government or industry in handling of the COVID pandemic and lockdown by the various stakeholders present here. I think it's very, very important for the dialogue to keep happening at all points of time and to keep exploring avenues of working together. Because as our president has said, I think the relationship that India and Nepal share is probably unique in the whole world. I would think that there'd be a very few instances. I don't think there'd be another instance of two countries sharing so much of history, so much of social, cultural, ethnic, every possible roots to be intertwined so socially, so strongly in every possible way, and to then have such a strong continuing relationship among the two countries. I think open borders is something that is unique to our relationship between our two countries. And barring minor hiccups, I think what's really important, and in fact, minor hiccups happen even between the best of friends and real brothers even. But the strength of our relationship is shown by the sort of cooperation and and understanding that both the countries have for each other, and the mutual respect, I think, which is the most important part. The mutual respect that both the countries share for each other, and the strength, I think, is coming out of our having absolute faith and trust in the intentions of both the countries. I think in these difficult times, uh, who best, even if there is a minor crisis at your home, the first person that one looks forward to working with is your neighbor. And I don't think you could have better and stronger neighborhood ties than between India and Nepal. And this is a crisis in which we have actually shown that the countries, the relationship that we have among our countries is of a level which is definitely much stronger than anybody could hope for. The activities of our two chambers working together, I think we have held two very successful web conferences on strategizing the economic rebounding and cooperation in India and Nepal on 30th of April this year, and exploring the hydroelectricity potential in Nepal on 23rd July. Both these web conferences were attended by hundreds of participants from the government, industry, media, think tanks, economic diplomacy, fraternity, and all. Uh, Today, again, in association with the Confederation of Nepal Industries and Nepal SBI Bank, PhD CCI's India Nepal Center is organizing this webinar on enhancing cooperation for MSMEs in Nepal. This is something in which both the countries have a shared interest, and India, of course, has had always a very strong support for MSMEs and a strong system for supporting of MSMEs. PhD Chamber, as our president said, is majorly focused on, it is the only national chamber in India, National Apex Chamber, which is totally focused on MSMEs, with more than 90% of our 130,000 members being from the MSME sector. We have, since 1905, the year of our inception, 115 years back, always been the voice of MSMEs. And I think the positive steps that our chamber is taking on a regular basis, including the MSME mentoring cell, in which our own former president, Mr. Anil Khaitan, is leading the efforts to guide and mentor the MSMEs in every way. I think we have a lot of opportunity to share our best practices and to work together to find ways in which our two countries can work together and enhance the possibility of MSMEs leading the challenge that has been given to us by the pandemic of COVID-19. I think the MSMEs are the sector which is the best placed, in fact, to provide maximum employment, which is the need of the hour across the world. Wherever, when a country like the United States of America can lose 32% of its GDP in the second quarter on an annualized basis, and a country like Germany has again lost 10% in the second quarter alone, I think these are the times when the focus has to be on providing employment, and who better to provide employment than the MSME? The MSME sector is the one where for every dollar of capital employed, you employ the maximum number of people. And this is what I think should be the focus of the governments in India and Nepal both. And we actually are seeing that happen also. I guess today's deliberations are going to be very useful for us to understand and appreciate the manner in which our two countries should be working together to take this forward. I really look forward to today's deliberations and to be a part of this conference. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, for your welcome address, and to also know that our dear friend Mr. Anil Khaitan, who's actually helped setting this India Nepal Center during his leadership days in PhD CCI as the president, is also leading the MSME.
MSME mentor, yeah.
So we'll need to pick his brains a lot more.
Absolutely.
Without any further ado, I'd like to request Mr. Anil Khaitan for his special address.
Thank you so much, Nirvan. It's so nice seeing you after a long time. Very good afternoon to each of the participants, to our President, Dr. D.K. Agarwal, to our President designate, Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, and I should say to the father of this whole India-Nepal desk of PhD, our own Secretary General, Mr. Saurav Sanyal, as this was his brainchild, and he is the mother, the father, the parent of this whole concept. Thank you, Mr. Sanyal. Thank you very much. Today, personally, I'm having butterflies in my stomach because the figures of the Indian GDP, April, June, are to be released today. Now, we don't know what will be the minus. But as Mr. Sanjay Agarwal mentioned, the GDP indices in the United States was established in 1947. And since 1947, the US has never contracted to 32.9%, which they have in the second quarter of this calendar year, April, June. Now, today, if we put ourselves as Mr. Government, today each country's government is between the devil and the deep blue sea. They're on a very thin ice. They have the entire economy of the health, and they have the entire economy of the economy. A very intricate balance has to be maintained. Taking the example of the United States, President Trump was quite mentally at ease. He didn't take it seriously. The US went up like a rocket. But the moment you say the United States took it seriously, how quickly they wound up the entire corona spread. And of course, let me not get into that. But what I'm saying is that be it Nepal, be it India, India's got a package of 20.7 lakh crores. Now personally, I don't expect the government to give free bailouts because I know that India is a poor country in terms of the various international indexes. We are still now classified as, I think, lower middle income. One step less than China. But the biggest thing what the government in India has done for the MSMEs is the 3 lakh crore guarantee, which the government is giving for each and every MSMEs without any collateral coming in from the company, without any contribution of the promoter. And that too, at interest rates between 7 to 7.5%. I know of companies who have filed in applications today and they have got the funds in the bank within 5 days because the whole formula is that 20% of your outstanding balance as on 29th of February, that money is to be credited to a micro, small, and a medium enterprise, which the government then also extended to cover the professionals, the doctors, the lawyers, the chartered accountants, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a great scheme the government has introduced, and the latest figures we have is about 1,52,000 crores out of the 3 lakh crores have already been sanctioned by the banks. and out of which I think 105 or 110 lakh crores have been disbursed. Well, there are concerns. MSMEs, a lot of MSMEs are not taking the money because until the supply chain network opens up, until the demand for their products open up, what are they going to do running factories, So we'll have to, I think, this is the time. I know it's very easily said, but it all depends on each sector of the businesses, that how they manage their operations. And I can just tell you from my personal experience of managing my businesses, is that during this pandemic, the biggest thing we've learned are what are the bad fixed costs. And those costs in my companies were being incurred year after year after year. Now, one of my companies being in the pharmaceutical sector, since we are an essential sector, so we could run in this pandemic 100% right from 25th of March. So we could identify which were the bad expenses. We could identify, we could improve our efficiencies. We could improve our productivities on the shop floor with lesser manpower. So we saw how much of idle baggage we are holding on. And those baggages are now over permanently. There is no question of having them on. Because when you can run your company on a concept of work from home and still, improve your top line and bottom line, why not? So, we also as private businesses, MSMEs, to conclude, I think we have to get very now proactive in our approach. It's no point what has happened has happened. It is not in a control of human being. It is some kind of a pandemic, but we have to know that we will and we can. We have come across the First World War, won it. Second World War, 1918, the Spanish flu, won it. Second World War, won it. The Great Depression, 1929, won it. Second World War, 39, 40, 43, won it. Then now fast forward 2008, the financial crisis, won it. And now the corona, let's hope we will all win and conquer. And as the leadership of PhD and I also the former president tell you, Nirvan, that I think we should work closely and on common areas of interest. Please do feel to call across, and whenever we can travel, we would be most willing to. Of course, you have the access to all the schemes of the MSMEs of the government of India. So maybe your government could consider the same as customized, because I know, and I'm sure, and to the unaware who are in this conference, I must make this point. The change of definition of MSMEs in India, that is going to be a huge game changer for the manufacturing economy, a huge game changer. Because now companies up to turnover of 250 crores with the investment in plant and machinery of 50 crores, and that too, your net block, not your gross block, which was previously in the definition. Now with that definition of the 12.15 lakh companies which are officially registered in India, at least 10 lakh companies will fall, which will have turnovers below 250 crores. So now you can imagine virtually the entire manufacturing economy of India will be depending on MSMEs. So the government is now full on and right on, and PhD is also right on with its members of MSMEs. And we are going at full speed ahead to see that we can again conquer. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Anilji. It's always really enlightening, and you always feel very positive every time we hear you. Definitely, the fundamentals and the dynamics of the government's focus and emphasis on MSME even in Nepal is very similar. as well as the importance of MSME for, let's say, rebounding the entire economy. We definitely got to, I think, exchange a lot more views, have much more offline workshops on engaging our MSME sector stakeholders along with your expertise and experience, and be able to help in increasing the overall efficiency and productivity of the sectors. We need to start planning that. But I would now like to request Anukulji, Mr. Anukul Bhatnagar, who is the Managing Director and CEO for Nepal SBI Bank, to please share with us a brief presentation on the sectors. And over to you, Anukulji.
Yeah. Thank you, Nirvana ji. Atul, I think you should put up my presentation.
Yes, sir. We are doing that.
Please. Thank you very much to PhD Chamber of Commerce, to Dr. D.K. Agarwal, Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, Anil Khetan ji, Saurabh Sanyal ji, and for this opportunity. And I welcome Mr. Mahaprasad Adhikari, Governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank, and Mr. Shishir Bhatta, CEO of IBN. I have the august chance of speaking before them here, so I've slightly changed my perspective. Now it is to the regulators I'll be talking. And my friends from India, Mr. Ashutosh, he was a big corporate honcho, and now he's a MSME entrepreneur. To Mr. Madhav Lal, who was the former secretary MSME, who will obviously tell us how the whole system in India got integrated. And Praveena Kala, my colleague from SBI, about her practical experience. And Kapit Dwaji from the Embassy of India at Nepal, and Vinod Atriyaji from BIFIN. And finally to Ambassador K.V. Rajan and Nirvana ji. Thank you all. I'll start with my presentation. Can you listen? Can you hear us, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, right, sir. So, I'll not bore you much with the definition. This is basically for the Indian audience, that this is how things are moving in Nepal, because I'm giving the Nepali perspective here. So there's no definition here, but in the monetary policy, which had come very recently, Nepal has done a sea change. And the bottom of the pyramid for MSME lending in Nepal, the bottom of the pyramid approach is there would be a drastic change for the good. Fixed assets, etc., have gone up. I'll go to the next slide, and there are some things there. There are about 3 lakh MSMEs registered, but as per World Bank's study here, about 67.5% of the MSMEs are in the informal sector, so which are not registered. So the data we have put on is the government data, but we believe that many more people are directly involved with MSMEs. The sea change which has happened this time in the policy, thanks to the government and the Rashtra Bank, is that normally we were lending only to 3 to 5% of the bank credit was going to MSMEs in Nepal. Now we are supposed to bring it up to 11% of our total portfolio by July next year, and to 15% in the year after that. Now that requires, the figures are here, but that requires, currently the data is around 7.33% is the broad data. My bank is also still at a very low level, but what it means is that this year we would have to pump in approximately 40,000 crore worth of Nepali rupees into the MSME sector in Nepal. So this is a big challenge for the banks, and 40,000 crore works out to something like approximately slightly more than 25,000 crores of Indian rupees. Now for a market to absorb so much, and the money is currently available with us. We have a excess liquidity overhang, so this money is available with us, and we are trying to lend it to the MSME sector, which currently we feel cannot absorb it because the entrepreneurs are not there. Another change which has happened is that we were generally lending, commercial banks were not doing direct lending. They were lending to MFIs and they were lending to SHGs, who were then on lending to the smaller institutions. So what Rashtra Bank has done is they have said this 15% or 11% this year has to now go to through the bank as direct lending, and individual account has to be below 1 crore Nepali rupees lending per account wise, which means about 60 lakh Indian rupees. So this generally works out to about 1 lakh new enterprises need to be set up, and they need to be bankable, and that is how the money which our budgets would be met and the money would be absorbed in the economy. So this is the biggest challenge we are facing currently. Rashtra Bank has done a survey which says 50% of SMEs have availed loans from BFIs, but this is basically linked only to the registered entities. And the figures are there, but the informal sector is the one at which all of us are aiming at. Once this informal sector comes in the purview of commercial banking, that is where the magic is going to come. The gap, credit gap in MSMEs, there is a beat management, UK 8 section access program. In 2018 said the gap is 15%, whereas IFC said that the gap is around 19%. But informally, we believe the bankers, I'm also the vice president of the Bankers Association, that the actual gap is much more than this. Now the challenges are the same as in most all developing economies. So lack of access to banking facility, not properly registered, audits are not too good, volume of sales are low, collateral, low collateral. So these are generally the same kind of issues we see in India. Now these are the challenges which are here in Nepal. The credit information bureaus are here, but they are not very functional in the MSME universe at all. We don't have any zero history system where they can choose good people and refer them to banks. Those stations are also not there. The risks are quite high because of the high migration capability of Nepalis. They generally 1/3 of the population is staying outside Nepal. So the risk is also associated that the bankers are looking at it from that angle. What happens if we lend and the entrepreneur just gives up and migrates to some other country? Economies of scale are small. The total GDP last year was about $30 billion. This year, obviously, it will be lower, but yes, the future is much better. Interest rates we were charging to MSMEs, I'm not so proud to say, but we had the highest margins there. So Rashtra Bank has come in with ceilings now, where we can't lend at a rate mandated by Rashtra Bank, and also there are subsidy elements. So this is one good thing in the monetary policy. Our way in which we feel the credit gap can be decreased is that financial access obviously has to be increased. Literacy through digital channels now with COVID, we know that is not going to go away all of a sudden, especially in Nepal, because of the hilly terrain and slightly stretched infrastructure. So we feel there'll be containments, there'll be red zones and all. So digital is the only way we think the banks can lend. And in this issue, I will discuss in my closing remarks. The guarantee schemes are there. There are in the monetary policy of venture capital, private equity companies have also been allowed now. So we are working around as to what do we do about that so that we address the capital gap of the MSMEs. Now, basically, this works out as to how do the regulators and the professional bankers find out new ways of credit and need assessment, and how to comply with the basically the compliance measures. So this is being worked out. We have the conventional models, but the regulators are quite open if we can suggest things to them. So we are working from the banker association as well. And the new things which are going to be really looked into is supply chain financing and factoring companies. So if this comes in, a lot of risk goes away from the banks, and they would be having a larger risk appetite. Now, this is the way. This is how I suggest, and we can deliberate over this and perhaps come back to it later. Is that next destination management is how we are looking at it. So for the banks, next destination is reaching 11% of their total credit portfolio in this now 10 months left in the MSME to lend to the MSME sector, together with the global slowdown and the COVID hit. So one thing which has hit us, the challenge which is immediate, is we are not used to lending directly to MSME sector. So here is where is the cooperation and the going forward, we require hand holding from associations like PhD Chamber or experienced bankers like SBI to come in and tell us how MSMEs should work now, and how the banks should come in, how to assess the risk and the credit need, how do we look at the total system. So what we felt was, we were discussing in the bank here and the other banks, was that we need to completely reassess the existing systems of lending to MSME, and not go by the usual things where we look at full collateral coverage, we look at guarantees from everybody. So can we do it on a cash flow basis? So these things are still being worked out, and we will be putting up such kind of things to the regulator, and we will see as what leeway they can give us. Now the basic issues with lenders here is, how do we identify prospective entrepreneurs? Where do we find additional 100,000 people? So this is one of the greatest issues facing up 1 lakh. How do we avoid NPAs? And how do we can lend, but we do not want to chase the future borrowers? How do we avoid them getting into a debt trap and facing distress? Then capital shortage and startup money. How do we get it to them? These entrepreneurs, most of them would also be ladies. How do we get it to them, and in a sustainable way? Then how do we ensure sustainability in a long run? It should not be a kind of this year's thing. It has to be now 15% of the banking credit will go into this sector. It has become the most important sector in Nepal after agriculture. This is another challenge we feel, which is external to the banks, but there is where we need the chambers to come in, the CNI, the PhD chamber from India, as to how do we address this. When we talk to potential entrepreneurs, they say, where is the need for consumers in Nepal to change their purchasing behavior with respect to Nepali products and services? It is so easy to import from other countries. It is cheaper, maybe better quality. How do they do that? How do we change the need of the consumers so that they buy Nepali products? And how do we substitute for invisible imports? Now we have open borders. So a lot of small product MSME goods and also their services, they just walk over from the border, and it is not even, it doesn't come through the banking channel. Now this, in my opinion, would be a huge amount, maybe 30 to 40% of the total import we are actually logging in. How do we develop the domestic and export market for Nepali products? I'm talking from the Nepal's point of view. Nepali products. And here I would like Mr. Ashutosh Bharadwaja to also tell us from his vast experience in working for FMCG companies in India. How do we do this for selling and sourcing Nepali products and also exporting outside Nepal, also to India? Should we go in for quotas in domestic purchases so that domestic industries and government has to purchase something from MSME segment only? Or do we have quotas in delivery platforms where big shopping marts necessarily have to allocate a space for Nepali products? this has to be seen. Then markets have to be created in e-platforms. E-platforms are developing in Nepal now. Currently, Sasto Deal has tied up with Flipkart. We have local other ones as well. Do we need to have a market for Nepali MSMEs in these platforms for their goods and services? Then how do we operate on, how do we develop e-platforms for MSMEs, where perhaps Mrs. Pravina Kala can say about experience from SBI later. How do we bring in handheld devices where loans can be delivered, say, within an hour or within a couple of days, like we have e-Mudra in India, and we have YONO, you only need one application from SBI, which are on handheld devices, and loans can be given to MSMEs, just sitting across the table. Lastly, we can look at entrepreneurs, but where do we come in with the development of the entrepreneur? We know people with ideas. We have these people. We have now returning migrants who are here, who are semi-trained, who are trained as well. Do we need to have a skilled manpower database, which MSMEs can easily catch upon, and with a minimum of startup or training, they can start with their own business? Is there a national MSME database where they can lean on each other to source products instead of blindly importing? Then do banks need to have managed training centers for self-employment programs? There is a system like this in India where every district has a RCT, Regional Self-Employment Training Institutes, where people are trained according to the cluster which is in that district by the banks and the central and state government. And these people are directly put on their own, and they are taken into, they are supported with finance. This is, then I believe that unless we have an integrated approach, it would not work out unless we also include agriculture. Because going forward in the rural areas, MSME and agriculture are very difficult to segregate. We have to integrate everything with the financial inclusion models as rolled out by government of Nepal and also pushed by Nepal Rashtra Bank. MSME, agriculture, financial inclusion, all in one. I believe that NRB should mandate district-wise credit deposit ratio monitoring so that they get to know if funds are being used in that district. Because I've come across chief ministers of the states in Nepal telling me that in their state, nothing is being spent on industry while people are just depositing money. So they are funding the industries which are actually working in some other states. And they say that their population is contributing to the funds which are made available to large industries, while their employment programs and MSME in their own states are languishing because of lack of funding and capital. So cottage industries, self-help groups, MFIs need to be onboarded at the same time. Can then cooperation with similar economies, India being one of them, since we are now talking to them, and like Nirvanji has said, some other associations will all come in, the Asia Association, so we'll also talk to them. Can SEZs be linked to SEZs, or can industrial MSME clusters be linked to clusters directly? So there's an exchange of ideas and markets and trainings, etc., and business as well. As far as SBI and Nepal SBI are concerned, we are ready to provide a bridge with all our experience and technology, as we are the largest lender to MSMEs in India. Between India and Nepal, we can bring in with all our now handheld devices and electronic dealer financing platforms to Nepal, and they can work on both sides of the border on the import-export platform. We are also ready to work, as I just understood that, with the MSME wing of PhD Chamber of Commerce, where we can see, in a granular way where we can immediately onboard these technologies and make them available for experimentation and beta testing. So with this, I conclude, and thank you Indo-Nepal Center of PhD for their initiative, and special thanks to Atul and Aditya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anukulji, for your always insightful presentation, a very holistic presentation on the MSME scenario in Nepal. You're absolutely right. We've got the focus and emphasis which even the central banks asked to be laid down on the MSME sector. You've got the e-commerce, which is just about to take off in Nepal. Obviously, the data penetration, the infrastructure is still under process. We've got the migrant workers coming back, which are adding on to the more skilled labor force in our country. So with all these different components in the ecosystem, I think we definitely have to manage and integrate and collaborate and complement all these different functionalities together. And one very important way to be doing that is the learnings that has already happened in India. I remember 10 years ago, I was very actively following the e-Chopal, which was initiated by ITC on the backward linkages setting up for the farmers and agricultural sector in India. I mean, these are the things which has matured to such a level that we can now, because of technology and access to data, access to mobile phones, access to financial services, we are able to start these services. Very important policy that the central bank Nepal came up with is that all the branches all across the districts in the most rural areas in Nepal had to fund and incubate, if I'm not mistaken, at least 10 MSMEs, 10 new micro and small medium enterprise entrepreneur. So that would have had a massive snowballing effect in terms of 5,000 to 10,000 new entrepreneurs coming in, which would then escalate to having employment in place, new products and services. So these were, I think, very well crafted policies that were included in the recent monetary policy. But I'm going to let our chief guest speak a little bit more on that. But just before we go on that, I'd like to request an address by our distinguished guest, Shri Kapidwaj Pratap Singh ji, commercial rep for the Indian Embassy in Nepal. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nirvana ji. Good afternoon, everyone, and special thanks to PhD Chamber for organizing. I think this is the third or fourth seminar that they have organized in the last 3-4 months, especially with Nepal. I was part of a couple of them, and others too I could not attend. So they are continuing their good work in promoting the Indo-Nepalese business engagements. And kudos to you, the entire senior team of PhD Chamber. Honorable Governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank, CEO, IBN, our friend and colleague who is now on his way to India, CEO Nepal SBI, and distinguished guests. I have been listening very patiently on the entire key remarks made since the beginning, and my interjection would be a little bit counterintuitive, so I want to seek your pardon beforehand, because this is my experience is based on what I've actually done in the last 2 to 3 years in terms of actually promoting the MSMEs economic engagement between the two countries, and hence it may be a little bit counterintuitive, but this is what is the kind of the factual situation between Indo-Nepal trade and economic engagement. First of all, when we talk about MSMEs, we somewhat automatically start to think about quotas, subsidies, protections, and all those things of the 1970s and 1980s. The reality between Indo-Nepalese trade today is not of what we are thinking. MSME does not necessarily mean inefficient manufacturing or inefficient value chain. So I'm very, very happy to share with you that there are leading MSMEs in both India and Nepal who are doing fantastic trade with each other, not only with each other, but also to third countries, and without having any sectoral specific subsidies or quota protection. And I'll come to those examples in the later half of my speech. Secondly, when we talk about the trade, it is we tend to think that the aggregate numbers would somehow what be applicable to the MSMEs micro numbers as well. For example, the Indo-Nepalese trade, it's doing around 8 billion today, and 7 billion odd is our export, and 1 billion is Nepal's export. Whereas in MSMEs, it is not so much of a trade deficit. There are almost all the exports that happen from Nepal are from this sector. Hence, in a way, there are many importers in India, MSMEs, who are dependent on exports of Nepal. Hence, it is not just one-way trade or one-way push of items or commodities from India to Nepal. Third, when we talk about our major export destinations in India, and we start thinking of maybe the trade hubs in India, where we export to maybe Europe or US, but the export originates for Nepal is not from those typical places. APIDA has done a study, and it has very succinctly found out key learnings from how the Nepal-India trade is happening. And it is happening not between India and Nepal, but rather it is happening between, let's say, Uttar Pradesh and Province 4, or between Nawalparasi and Sunauli. So it's very, very localized trade, and it's happening very, very, I would say, just in time in supply chain management. You would be surprised to know that the industries in Nepal or in India are planning in such a way that the supply comes in 24 hours, 36 hours. So there are no stocks being built. This goes to show the immense networking and an immense efficient supply chain that has been developed by our business along the border. And fourth thing, which we must keep in our mind, is that somewhat the aggregate problems tend to obfuscate the reality of MSMEs. For example, what are the challenges these MSMEs are facing may not be true for the trade in general. In the last 3-4 months, we are happy to share with everyone that the trade between India and Nepal has actually reached to around 85% of its pre-COVID numbers, both in terms of exports as well as imports. Rather, Nepal's exports have actually reached the top of what they have done in December and November. So that is a very heartening news for Nepal. Nepal Rashtra Bank has also released their CPI and other inflation indices, which also tends to show that demand is gradually coming back to normal in Nepal. Though we have had 2 to 3 weeks of severe lockdown, but this is just an aberration. How have we facilitated this in the last 3-4 months that the trades have reached their normal volume? And it is just not the Indian Embassy, but rather it's joint collaboration with Ministry of Commerce, Government of Nepal, Nepali Customs, Indian Customs, as well as with us. When we talk about MSMEs, it is not something that we can get to understand by reading a report, but it is actually facilitating that individual trade that happens. And there are certain challenges, and challenges are as small as the Indian exporter or the Nepali exporter not able to arrange their CHAs in time because of lockdown, or it is as small as the internet not working for them to update their database on EDI. So these are specific challenges which we have tried to assist, try to form wherever there are required exceptions so that we can facilitate this trade. We also ensure that there is a regular supply of CHAs at both Indian and Nepali custom points. The opportunity in terms of how this sector is shaping in between the two countries is very, very positive. There are certain challenges both at policy levels, which I think this is the right forum because we have Governor Nepal Rashtra Bank over here. And in MSMEs, the number one challenge that they face both for India and Nepal exporters is the speed with which they are able to remit money. It is still taking considerable lot of time. It is because the MSMEs are not having such high level of banking relations with the Nepali banks or the Indian banks. And secondly, the entire process of remitting money is taking time. We need to understand that these sectors or these agencies work on, as I mentioned in the beginning, work on maybe next day delivery or delivery in next 2 days. So with those kind of highly efficient supply chains, if payment cycles are not as equally efficient, they are facing challenges. Secondly, we need to be aware of the new business models which MSMEs are adopting. And one of the very popular model that is happening between India and Nepal is franchise model in service sectors, wherein Nepali entrepreneurs and even established companies are taking franchises of well-known brands in India, of course, with the local entire investment being local, and they to India. Now that needs to be taken in the right regulatory perspective. And currently I'm told that there is a TDS being deducted, which is somewhat more than the profit that the franchisor will have in India. So that needs to be addressed suitably. And third most important understanding is that in terms of banking channels, how will they will not necessarily be on LCs all the time. So can we have other channels like TTs being popularized? Where do we fit in? Because I have to also speak in terms of where the government of India is prioritizing Nepal's exports. So we have identified their top export items, which are two, which is one is the herbal medicines and second in the agriculture products. In both these sectors, we are trying to facilitate to the extent possible. It requires, first of all, enabling all our land custom stations, plant quarantine and animal quarantine enabled, which we have started doing gradually. And now all major trade crossing points in India and Nepal have a plant quarantine officers. What it means is that the Nepali farmers or the second level of exporter of agriculture products can quickly at the border get all the clearances and export to all the way in India. Thirdly, we have, as we all understand, agriculture is a highly controlled and regulated sector in both countries. And we have tried to include all the top items of Nepal in our order, which allows easy and quick export of Nepali produced agriculture products as well as processed agriculture products. Thirdly, we are trying to harmonize the standards. It is rather surprising, and it will not be surprising at all, that the standards that the two countries have in terms of imports of these commodities are very, very different from each other in key sectors. So both the governments have started this exercise of harmonizing these standards so that an exporter in Nepal does not specifically have to design his commodities or products to meet the Indian standards and vice versa. There's been welcome change in terms of both import regulators of India, FSSAI, and their counterpart in Nepal. They have also entered into an MOU and have finalized a list of 27 items which will be accepted by each. So these are positive changes. These are some things which we are doing at the ground, which may not be very, very large when we see the aggregate numbers, but these are the things that matter at the ground level. With this, I end my short remark, and I look forward to hearing from the two distinguished speakers who follow me, the CEO IBN and then Honorable Governor Nepal Rashtra Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavitwaji. Listening to you, I think your designation of commercial rep does not do justice. I think the amount of perspective you're giving from a macroeconomic level to the opportunities, it's really, really good to hear. Like you mentioned, we've got two very prominent, our guest of honor and chief guest speaking. I would now like to request Shri Sushil Bhattaji, our CEO for Investment Board of Nepal, to kindly share his views.
Thank you, Nirvanaji. Chair of today's webinar session and Chairman INC India Nepal Center PhD CCI Ambassador Mr. KV Rajanji, Chief Guest of today's session, respected Governor Nepal Rashtra Bank, Co-Chair of the session Nirvanaji, President, Senior Vice President, former President, Secretary General and leaderships from PhD CCI, Commercial Representative Indian Embassy in Nepal, paper presenter, MD and CEO of Nepal SBI Bank, Mr. Anukul Bhatnagarji, all distinguished panelists and participants, friends from media, very good afternoon. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers, that is PhD CCI, CNI, NSBL, for inviting me to speak as guest of honors in today's webinar on enhancing cooperation for MSMEs in Nepal, which is very timely. And we all are very well aware of the adversity the COVID-19 has brought in life and livelihoods of people of both countries. And level of impact, the loss are being assessed by concerned authorities, as I told in past also. Based on the impact and loss assessment, a recovery plan will speak on financing strategies and the roles each sectors, including MSMEs, will have to play for rebounding the economy. And in terms of responding to the pandemic, Government of Nepal has been putting all best effort to control and maintain this unprecedented situation. And all possible measures are being taken to ensure smooth supply of basic necessities. So report says, some 90% of the firms are MSMEs and they contribute up to 60% of the total employment and up to 40% of the national income, that is GDP, in emerging economies. Well, coming to the facts, this clearly outlines the importance the MSMEs can play in accelerating socio-economic growth of the country. So there are, like we could say in record, if you see some small and large industries which are formally registered under SME category in Nepal for last fiscal year stands at around 8,000 in one fiscal year. And they are essential for, no doubt, for innovations, economic growth, and job creation. But generally, Nepalese MSMEs are involved in manufacturing sector, if you look into, are majorly focused in handicraft, materials, and textiles, and as well as tourism sector. But both of which are actually for us prominent, foreign exchange earning generators. So we all know MSMEs all over the world have been facing common problems and challenges, like be it in terms of, we were talking of, harmonizing the standards and even a lot of things. Maybe it could be in relation to dealing with financial instruments. So these frameworks, which really needs to be improved down the line, and even it's not just the access to finance be availed to these entrepreneurs under this domain, but it relates to the cost also, the cost of financing, and how to inculcate the traits and attributes of an entrepreneurship and managerial skills, or to acclimatize them with the latest technology is what is a need of an hour. And there a lot of things are to be taken care of, but things are really moving, and I can see in principle of change management, things will go on improving. But talking in retrospect to FDI angle and the role and responsibility Investment Board Nepal has, I would like to express that Investment Board Nepal since a decade has been working hard in garnering private investments. Its promotion and facilitating private investors, be it domestic or foreign private. But further, we are also creating a framework to manage PPP, the real public-private partnership, mechanism, the system, the protocols that are required, the procedure that needs to be adhered, so as we could manage the projects or businesses under PPP model more effectively and efficiently. So we are equally focused and taking all initiatives required to improve parameters that can improve overall business climate, make it more congenial. So that may come to, again, things which are under IBN's control. Let's say if we are looking into businesses or projects of some threshold, but at the same time, the Department of Industry is also trying best to see how we can shorten the process or expedite statutory clearances, or even merely providing recommendations to concerned agencies, and which is part and parcel the work that the government entities should be doing in terms of facilitating the private parties. So on physically one-stop service center has been set up, and continuously there are been efforts taken to ensure that the processes are more streamlined. And we are also even trying to develop a web integrated platform for one-stop service center. So we would see, we are trying to do the readiness mapping of different agencies which are to provide service in an integrated manner. So IBN has been doing its best to create opportunities for large businesses. But talking about MSME, again, I'm just trying to interlink between MSMEs and the bigger business, which we are eyeing for, garnering investment. It is well-known fact that MSME complement larger industries by being the most important backward linkage and ancillary units to big industries. So IBN's mandate is to attract large investments in Nepal. While we strive to do so, Nepal can only take maximum advantage of large scale foreign investment if we are able to offer necessary raw materials and other items in the value chain through our domestic industries. And this is where MSMEs can play a very vital and crucial role and make significant contribution. On the policy front, I would want to reiterate, the various investment related laws such as PPPIA, that is Investment Act and PPP, and FITA and IEA, that is Industry Enterprise Act, etc., have been amended. And we are continuously trying to look for, improving those legal infrastructure or acts that we have, and try to see, required regulations or directives or procedures or even other tools or even SOPs are being in pipeline. So we are really geared up trying to see that these things are in place, so as we have a very transparent approach of doing business, be it we sitting at a government institution heading our respective institutions. We need to see that we do work with the prudency and the utmost transparency. So overall business climate in Nepal, in terms of, we could recently visit to the World Bank's Doing Business rank, where we have improved from 94th position, where we have improved by 16 points. But this is not the thing. We have to look into other parameters where we really need to improve. So like one-stop service center, if it really works effectively, we could see the impact it will have in overall countries in terms of ease of doing business, where we would be repositioning ourselves. So while these are positive steps, but much remains to be done for this MSME sector. I totally agree. And we are all in COVID regime, and we don't know how this pandemic will evolve down the line. But I think this is a very appropriate time for us to, sit back, even be at work from home, but we can work on all these pending issues, or in terms of, setting up a system or making procedures. This is where we should totally engross ourselves. I think utilize the best time in terms of making all this system work smoothly for us in future, while we are really geared up rendering services to our prospective investors or entrepreneurs. So Nepal now is already focusing on, providing international linkages for exports, increase access to finance, strengthen supply chain, enhance use of IT in respective sector. We could see there are systems that are being developed and support R&D and innovations. So on MSME sector, this has to be more focused and channelized, and this has been done, but that has to be done more effectively in days to come. So priority has to be obviously given towards making a self-resilient and sustainable terms. So IBN is also complementing government's initiative in this line. But talking in retrospect to market access and basic infrastructure, we could see the border infrastructure like integrated checkpost point or container depot, or even the SEZ and all are coming up. But we need to see the border is properly managed, so as it will basically facilitate and ease the respective business entities to do business with comfort, and see that a lot of costs are also reduced, be it even cost of moving goods and all that has to be looked into very closely. And India has been a long-standing economic partner of Nepal, and in these difficult times it is crucial that countries strengthen their economic ties to successfully overcome the economic impact that is caused by pandemic. So this is time where we are responding to the situation, but we would have to chart out a recovery plan and vis-a-vis see that how we go down the line and try to really get back to new normal. So I don't know, we get back to the normal or not, but we'd have to chart out what new normal would be for us. So lastly, I really feel such webinars that have been organized by PSDCCI in association with CNI and SPI Bank is really good, because here, like, we have been exchanging our ideas and knowledge, and not only limit to that, but then on collaboration and relationship front on different, level, things are been moving in a very progressive way. So this is a good takeaway for me as well, attending today's webinar on a very pertinent issue. But at the same time, I would look forward, be it on SMEs, MSMEs issue, concerned line agencies, their line departments, or even the stakeholders or fraternities or associations that deal with, micro enterprises, which is been less attended, should be given more focus. So with this, I would like to thank you all and have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you so much, Sushilji. Also, again, congratulations on your new role. It's very important. I'm sure we all understand the role that you're playing for attracting in primarily large investments, which has a massive impact on the MSME sector and the creation of such businesses that come along. So thank you so much for that. I obviously also agree that it's not only access to finance for MSME, but also cost, which I think the central banks are taking note and doing a lot of work on that. Without further ado, our chief guest is here to address us. Honorable Shri Mahaprasad Adhikari ji, Governor of Nepal Rashtra Bank. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nirvana ji. Thank you once again. Chairman of this session, former Ambassador to Nepal from the Republic of India, Excellency Dr. K.V. Rajan ji, Co-Chair Mr. Nirvana Chaudhary ji, CEO of the Investment Board, Mr. Bhatta ji, President, PSD Chamber, Commercial Representative of Indian Embassy, Mr. Kapil Dodji, Chairman of the Indo-Nepal Center, Chairman of Indo-Nepal Center, Nepal side, Senior Vice President, Mr. Sanjay Agrawal ji, former President of the PSD Chamber, Mr. Khetan, and other President, Present MD of the Nepal SBI Bank, Mr. Ankul Bhatnagar ji, distinguished guests, webinar participants, government officials from Nepal and India, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to you all. It is my great pleasure to be here with you as part of this conference. Let me begin by extending my gratitude to the PSD Chamber, India Nepal Center, CNI and Nepal SBI Bank for bringing us together to discuss on such a very pertinent issue. I'd like to thank the organizer for providing me an opportunity to grace this session as chief guest and address it as a keynote speaker. I need not to emphasize here that the micro, small and medium enterprises contribute significantly to a nation's economy in terms of manufacturing, in terms of employment, export, and economic growth. Can you listen to me? Is it okay?
We can hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you. According to a study conducted by World Bank, the micro, small, and medium enterprises, they themselves represent around 90% of the business and more than 50% of the employment worldwide. Formal SMEs constitute up to 50% of the GDP in high-income countries and up to 40% in emerging economies. MSMEs face many challenges in day-to-day operation despite their crucial role in the economy. Access to finance is often cited as one of the primary obstacles that affects micro, small, and medium enterprises. According to a study conducted by IFC, 65 million firms, or almost 40% of the formal MSMEs in developing countries, have an unmet financing need that comes around $5.2 trillion every year. A large number of MSMEs globally operate informally. According to IFC, informal firms are estimated to account for around 72% of all MSMEs in the world and around 77% of all MSME in developing countries. Such firms rely mostly on informal financing that limits their growth and employment opportunities, creating conditional regulatory environment to formalize such MSMEs and linking them to the national value and supply chain is the prime issue that we have to address today. Now, allow me to highlight the status of MSMEs in Nepal. Mr. Bhatnagar has already presented some point related to the country specific status. There are around 300,000 SMEs registered in Nepal. SMEs contributes around 22% of our GDP, provides employment to 17 lakhs people, which is around 24% of our employed labor force. They contribute to industrial output and exports. According to a study conducted by UNESCAPE, MSME contributes around 90% of industrial GDP in Nepal, 80% of the industrial employment, and 70% of our export. In Nepal, most micro, small, and medium enterprises in urban areas are active in retail business. MSMEs in rural area are largely engaged in agro-based activities. Ensuring access to finance for the micro, small, and medium enterprises is still a challenge in Nepal. A study carried out by Nepal Rashtra Bank shows that majority of the small enterprises in Nepal take loan below 50 lakhs. As a source of their initial investment, SMEs use ancestral properties, personal savings, loans from VFIs, remittance income, loan from informal sources, and cooperatives. Only half of the SMEs in operation have used loan from the bank and financial institution, and only 16% SMEs have taken loan from the bank and financial institution as initial capital investment. Among loan disbursed by the bank and financial institution, 2/3 of SMEs loan are short-term in nature. Let me highlight the key efforts to promote MSMEs as the main driver of industrial output and employment opportunities in Nepal. The 15th plan, which is current plan, has devised a strategy for micro, small, and medium enterprises by promoting financial exchange and investment environment. It has a target to establish 15,000 MSMEs and create 60,000 employment opportunity annually by establishing business incubation center in each province, mobilizing challenge fund, initiating productive financial fund, and using credit guarantee. Government Nepal, while addressing the budget for 2021, has provision to provide loan to the small and medium enterprises affected from the COVID-19 crisis at 5%. NRB and Ministry of Finance are working closely to establish 50 billion loanable fund to support business continuation and employment protection of MSMEs that are hard hit by the COVID-19. Monetary policy for 2021 has also given top priority, as spelled out by earlier speaker, to MSMEs. It has encouraged credit expansion in private sector and SMEs. Commercial banks are required to extend at least 15% of their credit portfolio to agriculture sector, at least 10% to energy, and minimum of 15% to the MSMEs. Credit from the bank and financial institution is available to the SMEs at 5% interest under concessional credit program. A refinance fund has been expanded to provide refinance to MSMEs at 5%. In addition, the BFI are required to extend at least 5% of their loan to the deprived sector that mostly include micro enterprises. Banks are required to establish separate SME desks to facilitate credit to MSMEs. Despite all these efforts, we must admit that the MSME in Nepal need further support and still requires conceptual clarity on various spheres. Let me conclude by re-emphasizing the role played by MSMEs in job creation, industrial development, export, and overall economic growth. We need to focus on developing proper regulatory as well as financial infrastructure, develop suitable mechanism for addressing the MSMEs financing gap, promote credit guarantee scheme, and encourage them to use fintech products. Increasing the access of MSMEs to formal financial services by relaxing collateral requirement, removing the information asymmetries, and developing suitable MSMEs financing models could largely solve the issue of financing gap. In addition, we need to focus on promoting the access to finance for female-owned MSMEs that generally face higher constraint to financial resources and bringing the informal SMEs to formal networks. Promoting cooperation between INC and INC Nepal should help in enlarging the research as well as building envelope technology for MSMEs in Nepal. The COVID-19 has taken a toll on economy. The pandemic has affected the MSMEs the most. It is revealed by the survey recently conducted by NRB to assess the impact of the COVID-19 on our economy. It is found that 61% of the business were fully closed during the entire period of lockdown. About 1/4 jobs were lost during the period of lockdown. Most of these losses were borne by the SMEs. Given this, it is high time that we need to foster our collaboration and support MSMEs to make them able to absorb shocks in bad times. India has a large MSME sector and rich policy experience. MSME sector has made huge contribution to Indian growth, contributing significantly to manufacturing sector growth and creating jobs. However, like in Nepal, MSME sector in India been severely affected by pandemic. Finally, let me once again thank the organizer for inviting me to this event. I hope insights shared in this session and the deliberation made by the expert from India and Nepal will contribute to collaborate for promoting MSMEs and will ensure a sustainable growth in the region for the shared benefit, for the shared prosperity. Thank you once again for the opportunity. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir, for your key address. As a chief guest, very insightful, obviously covering all aspects and the work that is being done, as well as the importance of MSME in the economy. Thank you so much for taking out time, sir, and coming for this event. Your invaluable knowledge and guidance to, especially in our current scenario and situation in Nepal, is obviously very well appreciated at all times. I would now like to request Shri Madhavlalji. He is the former Secretary Minister for MSME for the Government of India, to please give in some of your views, sir.
Good afternoon to everyone. I've been listening with a lot of interest to all those who have spoken before me. And, one thing which I would immediately, gather from this discussion, and something as a policymaker we have been facing in India, is the heterogeneity of the MSME sector. So while we may talk about, the MSME sector as one whole, it is important to remember and to note that MSME sector itself is highly heterogeneous in nature. This came out in the presentation of Mr. Anukul Bhatnagar, as well as of Mr. Kapidhaj from the Indian Embassy, that there is no single template for the MSMEs. So when, for example, when Mr. Bhatnagar was addressing the issue, he was mentioning about the informal MSMEs. Now, he mentioned a number, if I remember correctly, of 67% of the MSMEs in Nepal being in the informal sector. I do recall from my days in the government that we had estimated that the percentage of MSMEs in the informal sector was close to 85%. And it was a number which was increasing. So one has to remember that they are also MSMEs, just that they are not registered with the government bodies. The other is that MSMEs are of various hues, which you yourself have just now mentioned, that there may be some very high-tech MSMEs, and there would be MSMEs which are primarily of the micro enterprises owned by people who are just trying to eke out a living. So within these two extremes, there are any number of types of MSMEs. Thirdly, it is also important, I think, in the context of discussions when the chambers are discussing, as to the constituent members of those chambers and the kind of supply chain or value chain in which they are involved. Because at the end of the day, MSMEs cannot be looked at in isolation. And this came out, I think, very clearly in some of the presentations before me, that at the end of the day, it is the competitiveness which matters. And it is not merely the competitiveness of an individual MSME that we are looking at, but the competitiveness of the entire value chain. So, and value chains are generally related to sectors. So while individual members may have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, I am not very sure whether that kind of tacit knowledge may be always transferable to other sectors. For example, knowledge from pharmaceutical sector or the agro-industry sector, is it really easily transportable to the light engineering sector? Or now that service sector is also included in this, would a person who's been involved in the light engineering industry be the right person to talk about a service industry, say tourism? So the point which I'm trying to make is that keeping in view the heterogeneity of the sectors from an institutional standpoint, both in relation to the business associations on either side, on the Indian side as well as Nepal side, as well as the institutions of the government or related financial institutions, it is important to look at the MSMEs also in a disaggregated way. Their problems are entirely different. So what kind of products are useful for the micro enterprises may not always be that relevant for the medium scale enterprises. The kind of products which are, by products I mean the solutions, the kind of solutions which one might recommend, for example, for, a large number of MSMEs are also working on different things. I mean, they may be working on seasonal products, for example, seasonal commodities. So their requirements of finance would be entirely different. So the long and short of it is, and that is a point which I had been meaning to mention over here, that for developing sustainable collaborations, especially with the chambers in mind, I'm suggesting that it's important to focus on some sectors, on some value chains, and go deeper into those issues, rather than, I think, the MSME sector as a whole, because there would be other institutions which perhaps would have that kind of knowledge. But having said that, there are, of course, a few broad areas which are common, and there would be a lot of common problems. Generally, when we are talking about MSME policies and development of MSMEs, we are looking at primarily three areas, which have also been talked about in the discussions before me. One is finance, the other is the market and the networks connected with the markets. And the third very important thing is the productivity issue, the competitiveness of the MSMEs. And when we are talking about finance, I think this again came out in Mr. Bhatnagar's presentation, that it is not just the finance for starting an MSME, but the other related issues of finance, including trade finance. And not merely the trade finance in which the bank is intervening, also things like, if the payments are not made in time, the delayed payments issues and so on and so forth. So there's an entire ecosystem in the financial domain. And likewise, in the market domain, we've already talked about the supply chains, how the supply chains can be strengthened. I think productivity is in the special context of COVID especially. Mr. Khetan had mentioned that this is a theme which needs to be looked into with a lot more seriousness. And there are a lot of possibilities which have suddenly, come to light as to how the competitiveness and the productivity can be. And in that, I think the associations can generally play a very important role. So I would say that technology in future would be playing a very important role, cutting across the sectors, including in the informal sector, particularly in relation to the finance to the informal sector, in bridging the gaps in finance, and so on and so forth. So I would not like to take much time because there are other speakers also, and we are running out of time. But I have one suggestion to make, which I would like to emphasize in conclusion as well, that it is perhaps useful to set an agenda, which is a limited agenda, but where there are possibilities of going deeper into the problems and possibilities of MSME cooperation, and in fact, in general, about enhancing trade between the two countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madhavji, for your insight and your obviously experience leading such an important ministry in the past as well. I completely agree with you. Technology will play an important role, but that also has to go hand in hand with the development of the infrastructure of the technology in the country, which is going up exponentially, as well as the percentage of people still in the unbanked sector, which is also changing. So I think both going hand to hand. And like you correctly mentioned, how two chambers, two organizations, companies can play an important role today in doing the preparatory work side by side in creating a much more effective and efficient sector going forward is absolutely key. I would now like to request Mr. Ashutosh Bhardwaj. He's the Managing Director of Novo Manufacturing to please give in your views, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's fairly intimidating to be in such an august company. To give you a little background, I've spent over 3.5 decades setting up fairly large MNCs like Coke and Perfetti and Reebok in India. And having done that, I moved to start my own manufacturing about 2.5 years back. And what I propose to share today with you is my experience as a MSME and what is it that's helping me facilitating my setting up my business. So I'll just quickly run you through some of my basic thoughts. I started last year. And when I started off, is the screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, wonderful. So when I started about 2 years back, one of the things that helped me, I was on the corporate side and never had experienced what it takes an MSME or somebody to set up a manufacturing facility. The banks and the government were extremely forthcoming in India. And I'm sharing this with you in terms of an environment which is fairly conducive to MSMEs in India right now. And what is it that has probably happened in the past, which is helping us today? When we talk of the government, the moment I said we wanted to register ourselves for Startup India, it took us no time. 72 hours after we completed the formality, we were in. We went across to the banks for help. We got them in less than a week's time. Moving up from there, from a FMCG corporate, when I was getting into manufacturing, I was struggling with various technicians and getting operators to run my factory. And that's where again I was guided to go across to the clusters. And I went across to the clusters, spoke to the campuses, got people across in no time. Moving up from there, when we were setting up the factory, the government approved labs were extremely forthcoming. They came up, they set up our testing standards, they helped us buy machines, they set up our protocols, measuring protocols. And last but not the least was the government body helping us on marketing. Why is it that I'm telling you all this? So it's a known fact, it's known to everybody. Why I'm saying this is that it becomes so much more easy for a person who walks in to be handheld. Whilst I knew most of the things, how to go about them, but when there are experts and government bodies coming forward to help you, the environment suddenly becomes conducive and it starts facilitating the growth process. As an outsider, how do I see Nepal as a potential market? It's a major market in the neighborhood. There are formal and informal bilateral relationships that are already trade existing between the two. There is a considerable amount of trade that's happening in terms of small ticket industrial products, spares and services. Labor from India is finding opportunities and employment in Nepal. Government of Nepal, I hear, has been emphasizing on import substitution and increased focus on exports and re-exports from Nepal. This is what I derive while hearing some of you was that the central government in Nepal is looking at reverse migration. The Nepal government is trying to address the bottom of the pyramid for fresh MSMEs, new entrepreneurs for local production. And so now where does it as an outsider, how do I see collaborating with Nepal? Now, one thing that has come about very recently is a e-platform for collaboration. And an e-platform for collaboration is working across very effectively. First thing is, which I'll start with the bottom one, which is a help that a MSME requires. When an MSME starts up, he needs help in terms of IPR, branding, legal documentation. Now in India, if I request, I immediately get help in terms of people who come across at very, very, very nominal prices to come and help me with documentation, with IPR filing, with legalities that need to be complied upon. And more importantly, protection in terms of understanding the complete process so that my applications don't get rejected. The second thing is there is a huge amount of skill gap analysis that's happening. Now it's kind of taken up and it's kind of got speeded up after the COVID. A classic example is this gentleman, the Indian actor called Sonu Sood. He's developed an app and he's provided a huge amount of employment. Over 20,000 people have already been employed, and the UP government has done that. When people went back, the database was captured, the skill sets were captured, and they are looking at it very aggressively. I think we need a platform where we can approach for skilled and unskilled people. The third thing is create a common e-commerce platform, a commercial platform. Today, if you look at the aggregators, let's look at Uber, for example. Let's look at Fab India, for example. What are these companies? These companies are basically aggregators. Now, if you want to grow MSMEs, if you want to grow micro-scale industries, then we have to invest in the skilled people who are doing this work, providing them with finances, providing them with a logistics support, and then helping them market. Now, marketing has become relatively easy now. If I must share this with you that prior to the COVID, we were supplying to all large public sector and a few private sector enterprises. Suddenly, the orders stopped, and there was the pipeline suddenly dried up. We started with e-commerce platform between Amazon and Alibaba and eBay, and then Gem and Moglix in India. And right now, in just about 2 months' time, it took us 24/7 for 2 months to get ourselves registered, to get the documentation done. But post these 6 weeks of effort, we don't have time to breathe. We don't have time to breathe. We have to actually send vehicles, because Bombay, where we have our manufacturing facility, it's difficult for the workers to come in. We are able to get them across and manufacture. But all that I'm trying to put across to you is that the environment has to be made conducive for MSMEs to grow. Policies can be made, but if the policies are not executed to support the MSMEs and facilitate easy working for them, then it might be a deterrent. Financial sector, government bodies, regulatory bodies, the way they help us today in India is commendable, and which is what I would recommend and request a common platform to be made for a collaboration between Nepal and India, which facilitates people who are interested in moving across to Nepal and take advantage of reverse exports, job working out of Nepal, and also probably use quotas of Nepal to go and export outside of Nepal. So thank you very much. That's all I had to say from a operator's perspective. Thank you.
Ashutoshji, thank you so much. This is really, really insightful. At CNI, we are also been discussing about exactly the same kind of an initiative. I'm so happy that you mentioned this. We'll definitely get in touch with you offline to see how we can collaborate this, because CNI, like PhD CCI, role is to provide a platform and information as
Thank
well
you,
as.
Mr. Chaudhary.
Thank you so much for your presentation and taking time. We're really, really happy you've done that, and your level of understanding is just amazing. I would now like to request Dr. Binod Atria, MD for BFIN, to give his views. We've just got 3 more speakers. We're planning to conclude this in the next 15 minutes. So please bear with us. And Binodji, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nirvana. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, all of you. Basically, on Nepal monetary policy and the MSME sectors, much has been highlighted by Nirvana, even and our governor and Sushil sir as well, CEO of the Investment Board of Nepal. Even Anukul sir has highlighted much on the exact situation of the MSME lending in Nepal. So I was just referring some of the literature, and I was able to find some literature. The recent survey has been done by ILO, and there is also a survey done by NRB, Nepal Rashtra Bank, and there is also a survey done by the CGAP on the MSME sector. So I'm just trying to highlight some of the findings. Even though I have the presentation, I think that if I roll on the presentation, it will be very long. I don't want to do that one, and I just wanted to highlight some of the results that has been identified by those 3 surveys, and I have tried to summarize those surveys. So first of all, during this lockdown period, business has stopped. Some has really stopped. Some has partially stopped. Some are operating. That is the survey. That is the survey result. As our honorable governor has also said that in Nepal, during lockdown period, 61% of the industries were totally shut down. The second issue that has addressed by this survey is that revenue has decreased considerably, and in the year of 2020, again there will be a decrease in the revenue. That is the perception that the survey has revealed. Third area is that the orders and products has been decreased. So most of the in MSMEs, they were forced to decrease the orders and productions. Fourth, they have reported that a supply chain disruption is there, and it will be continuing a challenge in the year 2020. Fifth, the cash flow will be a serious constraint for them, and it was a constraint, and in the year 2020, that will be a constraint again. And the next one is that they were forced to reduce the employment. They are forced to reduce the number of employees, and there is a shortage of employees. The reasons are there because of the lockdown, because of they have to take care of the people, because they are afraid of the infection. That is what they have said. And most of the enterprises, they have reported that they have taken adequate steps to inform their staff, to improve their workers about the COVID-19. And they have issued some of the personal hygienic instruments, such as the masks and other things. That is what they have highlighted. So the need, what they need right now, that has been summarized over here. Their needs are: one, advice on how to prevent from infection. That is the need they have addressed. So probably a PhD CCI and BFIN could work together and see where we can forge together and offer these services to the MSMEs. Second is the business continuity advice. That is what they were looking for. How to survive their business, how to lead forward their business, how to increase their productivity, how to increase their production. Those are the areas that they are looking forward advice. That is the advice they were seeking forward. The other area they are looking for is advice on diversification and sales channel. Much has been said that now probably it is the time for all of us to go on e-platform, on the sales channel, and they are also like to get some support in the areas of the diversification. Where are the diversification, what they can do more than what they are doing right now. And also they are also trying to need the expert, or they are also need some sort of training on how to work on online, because now we are forced to do work from online, we are forced to do work from home. So they also need some sort of advice how we can do online trading, or how we can do online business, or how we can work from the online also. They also need training on the business management, how business should be managed, because as we know that most of the MSME and the microcredit institutions, they are poorly managed. So how we can tell them how to improve their business, how to maintain their records, how to do their auditing, how to do their accounting, how they can develop their businesses. Also, they also need the short-term finance, how they can meet their short-term finances. They also need the regulatory clarity on the instruction, on the monetary policies, or any government instruction during this period time. And they also need more information on COVID-19. They also require some supplies, social protection measures to protect themselves from the COVID-19. So based on these three studies, I have, even though there are percentage, what percentage of enterprises have said this, what percentage of employees has, there are so many other indicators, but to summarize the research finding, the survey finding is that right now the entrepreneurs or the MSME, they are in need of support, they are in need of training, they are in need of working capital finance, they are in need of clarity on the regulatory perspective that central bank or government agencies has enforced to them. So BFIN is a capacity development center created by banks and financial institutions in Nepal. It is a public sector body, and we are here to support the banks and financial institutions, cooperative sectors, even the government sector, even the government, because government is indirectly a shareholder of this Banking, Finance and Insurance Institute of Nepal. So we can work together with the PhD CCI and Nepal India chapters in the areas of training. We can collaborate together in training. We can collaborate together in research, collaborate together in services. We can collaborate together in care. We can collaborate together in literacy areas. So these are some of the areas where probably we should be come together, discuss further, and elaborate where we can forge relationship and work together. Thank you, Nirvanaji. Thank you for giving this time. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you, Vinodji, for your remarks. Absolutely right. Training is very, very critical and key. And I think with the use of technology today, we can get access and even do that at a much, much larger audience as well. Formerly, our last speaker, someone who's there in most of our sessions, who's You take out time for our session so well. Thank you so much, Mrs. Praveena Kala, for your time. She's the director for Paramount Cables, as well as a former banker, CGM for SBI. As a last speaker, we'll be delighted to hear some of your views before I pass the floor to Mr. Saurabh Sinel and Atul ji, please.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I was listening to all the speakers very intently. And of course, I had prepared my own presentation, but most of the points were covered, and banking aspect, of course, I will take. Some of the things which really were very, very interesting was one comment by Mr. Sanjay Agrawal, which he said that, with the neighbors, we always grow together, and that's what we really believe in. So we are committed to the growth between India and Nepal together. And of course, Mr. Khetan mentioned credit guarantee fund, which India has. I hope the similar fund is also available in Nepal, or they can always think of, because that has helped bankers a lot in giving loans. Because if there is some kind of credit guarantee, if there is a default, you pay the fee and you can get the money back. So that's one thing maybe Nepal could look into if it's already not there. Then Mr. Bhatnagar's presentation was very, very insightful and very good. And where he says that from 3% to 11%, as a banker, I know it's not so easy, because we are ready with funds. Liquidity is huge, but whom do we really give to? You need people, no? Credit absorption is very, very important. And that is where I'm coming to, that how do we create that capability or that atmosphere where credit absorption does take place? There are many ways we can do. Of course, there are each platforms, but their end-to-end solution has to be there. Mr. Bharadwaj his was one success story, and that was, he got it there. In his case, he had that advantage that he had a place, which was defined. But when for a small entrepreneur, when he goes or she goes, does he get the same thing? And especially if you're in hinterland. The other day, I was in a panel where, it's some time back, the Vietnam ambassador is there. And he also said that MSMEs are finding it difficult in a country like Vietnam, where, a lot of manufacturing happens. And getting finance is difficult. So most of the people go to in a structured way, or family, friends, or money lenders and all. So that is the piece which we have to connect. For that, we have to provide an end-to-end solution. An end-to-end solution can come only if we take a model, and here all the chambers, the government, and all the other bodies under the aegis of your central bank, you have to have a structure. And that structure has to see that even in hinterland, whatever is the requirement, whatever raw material is available, there only the people should go, because that is their strength. In that local place, they develop those groups, they give them that training, and after that, there has to be a financing tie-up. First thing you need to do is please open account of every human being in your country, like we have done it in India with Jan Dhan accounts. Then once we see that how the account is moving, then we can give them e-mudra. We have this special product in SBI we had that is called e-mudra. We just see that last 6 months transaction in the account, and through that we just decide, okay, we can give this person this much loan. We just offer it online. He takes it. Even if he's computer illiterate, in Odisha, in most difficult district of Bolangir, there is a huge offtake. 100 crore in a month we disbursed. That once people come to know that this is available, we have our checks and balances, we will do our running, the system will do it for us, and we will select our people. But it would happen, actually it happened within 2 seconds. Because as soon as one logs in and he says, okay, an algorithm works, and you get the loan. Until and unless you do not connect these small pieces and small entrepreneurs, then they have to get connected with the backward integration, forward integrations have to be done. Here you have to ensure that our people only get that. Once you have that piece in place, money is coming to them automatically without, going to a branch, standing, asking. Distances are so huge. The only thing they need is good connectivity. So to have this kind of growth, you need to have good connectivity, both of road and also of internet, so that there can be the product offtake should also happen. So we need to work on those two pieces very, very seriously. And after that, it will be much, much more easier. You see, when a big factory is set up, I know of a very large project which has come up in Northeast. And you know how many people, and that's 2,000 crore project. And how many people they have employed? Not even a single one. Everything is online, it is automated, and they have just few people which runs. But MSME are the people or the enterprises which give job creation. So it is necessary that we support them. And for that, whatever possible needs to be done, that has to be provided. They have, once they are able to reach the banks, they get the loans, then they need to be integrated with the e-platforms like eHeart. You can always have it as small eHeart in your area. There people go. You know, if you must have heard of MS Swaminathan Foundation, there they have trained people across villages. Even one girl is 10th pass or 12th pass, one person. They teach them. And then from there, they sell things in Bombay, from Calcutta, wherever there is requirement, they will go to that heart and they will do it. So we need to develop e-hearts at all levels. Of course, then once you are good enough, then there is a lot of online marketplaces. They will be ready to take you. Your product should be up to the mark. But first thing first is teach people to do banking at every level. Once they learn to do banking, then only they can avail those banking facilities where you want 3% to 11% to go. And of course, for the larger SMEs, there are a lot of people who can help them. No, lot of people. There are lots of products. They can take term loans. They can take foreign currency loans. They can take ECCB. Then for them, they don't have to be told. They just need to go to the bank and they will get it. So with these words, I would end, and I would say that all the best. And please go the e-way all the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Khalap. Very insightful. Something that even in Nepal we are focusing a lot on, especially on the deprived sector lending. There's a huge process and initiative on bank accounts being opened at the grassroots level. A lot of international agencies are participating in this initiative as well. You're right, E is the way. Use of technology and digital fintech is the way. But again, having the right infrastructure is very important as well. So thank you so much for your insight. We have almost concluded the session. Thank you all so much for your time. Before we end, I would like to request my mentor, my co-chair, Ambassador, Mr. K.V. Rajan, to please say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, Nirvan. Thank you for steering this whole meeting so beautifully. I think this has been a very, very rewarding interaction. There are dozens of ideas really which have come up, which we intend to follow up on. Maybe the suggestion that we should now pick up specific sectors and then go a little deeper into what the possibilities and the requirements are. That would be one line of action. The other would be to go more local, as our commercial representative colleague from the Indian Embassy mentioned. A lot of trade is actually happening across the border at a fairly local level. And I think there we can certainly try and develop, chains of production and supply and export, keeping the employment factor also in mind. I think, as our foreign minister mentioned, so we will keep all these things in mind and make a summary of all the suggestions that have been made. And maybe I'll be in touch with you one way to see how we can take this forward. Thank you, one and all the participants.
Saurabhji,
yeah, SC sir will give the vote of thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, as
Thank you. Thank you, all the distinguished panelists. I have been listening to all of you, and I would like to congratulate each one of you for this wonderful webinar on enhancing the cooperation for MSMEs in Nepal. I would like to acknowledge and thank our chief guest, Mr. Mahaprasad Adhikari ji, Honorable Governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank, sir. Thank you so much for your candid and lucid remarks and what all is happening to help the MSMEs at Nepal. It was a very, very informative advice that you have given us, and there are many best practices which is there for us to emulate in India. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time and being with us. I would like to thank our guest of honor, Sri Sushil Bhattaji, the Chief Executive Officer of the Investment Board Nepal. He's been a very close associate with me for almost 15 years now, and we have, prior to my joining the chamber, we were friends, and I've been visiting Nepal and executing some projects there, some infra projects. And he has been a very good friend and a colleague who has helped us all throughout our projects. Thank you so much for giving your remarks, and I wish to congratulate you of becoming the CEO of Investment Board Nepal. It is a very, very well thought out change of guard for you, as you were a member in the Planning Commission and now you are the Chief Executive of the Investment Board Nepal, which will help Nepal as a country, as a state, and in developing relations with India in the long way. And going forward, it is going to help PhD CCI and CNI to a great extent, because we'll be associating and collaborating with each other in a much better manner. I would like to thank our address by the distinguished guest, Mr. Kapit Dhwaja Pratap Singh, Commercial Representative, Indian Embassy in Nepal, for giving his valuable remarks and giving out the commercial aspects, what exists in Nepal and how India can collaborate and go forward. I would like to give special thanks to Mr. Anukul Bhatnagar, the MD and CEO Nepal SBI Bank Limited, who's also now on his way back to our country, and he would be looking after the state of affairs in the State Bank of India in our country in India. Looking forward to meeting you and looking forward to your graceful visits, physical visits to our chamber now for developing and promoting India-Nepal Center, which was established during the tenure of our former president, Sri Anil Khaitanji, and Mr. K.V. Rajan and PhD chamber. We worked very hard to establish this, and it is bearing fruits of excellence now. Things are moving in the right direction, and I'm sure after the opening of the lockdown 4.0, which is very likely to happen from 7th of September now, things are looking up, things are looking very bright and shiny, because there's a huge demand in our country which is existing, and both the sides are going to be looking forward to interacting with each other, not only virtually but also physically now. Let's hope and pray for the best. Thank you so much, Mr. Anukul Bhatnagarji, for your very good remarks. I would like to thank Mr. Madhav Lal, sir, former Secretary, Ministry of MSME, Government of India, for giving your very valuable insight that most of the 90% of the MSMEs in India are in the unorganized sector, and most of them were struggling for remaining afloat during the pandemic, as also last year during the global meltdown, and year before last when there was when the GST things came up, and then during the problems of the finances, the cash transactions, which were again, had a very, very vulnerable effect on the MSME at large. Even though many of them were registered, 90% of the MSMEs of India, they were in the micro sector, were largely affected. 50% of them got really badly affected in the smaller segments, and then of course the medium sector had some provisions, and they were into big leagues, into big government contracts, so they were marginally affected. However, there was a very big meltdown, for the pandemic, and now things are looking up with the government of India and the Honorable Prime Minister giving a very, very big support of 20 lakh crores, especially to the micro, small and medium, and especially to the segment of micro, small and medium enterprises for rupees 3 lakh crore, which was primarily in the shape of loans, and with the moratorium from the RBI coming in till 31st August. And we hope and pray, and we especially have represented to the RBI that this moratorium period should be extended from 31st to 31st of March 2021, because that will have a real effect on bringing up the economy in a very big manner in our country, and which will not only help India but also all our neighboring countries, because there is a huge demand which is generated in India. There is a huge population which is looking forward to goods and services, and the MSMEs will play a very important role in making the bridges between the countries surrounding India, and this is going to go a very long way. So we hope that the RBI governor, the Honorable RBI governor, listens to us and extends this period of moratorium to 31st March 2021. On behalf of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I would also like to thank the other speakers, Mr. Ashutosh Bhardwaj, the MD of Novio Manufacturing Private Limited, Dr. Binod Atreya, MD BFIN, again a very old friend, a very old associate, and of course he has been helping PhD Chamber in many ways in sitting from Nepal, and also while visiting India. He has always made it a point to visit PhD Chamber and share his thoughts and views always with us in bringing both the sides, both the MSMEs, both the industries in India and Nepal together. So thank you so much, Dr. Binod, for again sharing your valuable insights today. I would like to thank Mrs. Praveena Kala, Director, Paramount Cables Private Limited, an ex-banker, former CGM of SBI. Thank you, ma'am, for always coming on board and sharing your very important insights. Thank you so much for always being with us and sharing your thoughts and views as a former banker and also as the Director of Paramount Cables Private Limited, one of our member companies. Thank you so much. I would like to mention and thank our President, Dr. D.K. Agarwal, who set the stage for this conference today and spoke and gave the introduction of the MSMEs in India and the MSMEs of Nepal, how they can collaborate, what all they can do, what all initiatives were taken by the government of India and the state governments in India, and how Nepal can emulate the same principles, the same kind of benefits which can go to their SMEs, and to have a win-win situation between India and Nepal. I would also like to thank our very special Senior Vice President, Mr. Sanjay Agarwal. Though he is at Dubai, but he's taken out his time and come on this webinar and spared his valuable time and his valuable thoughts today in this seminar. Thank you so much, sir. You've been very passionate about MSMEs. You were a SME, now you have grown above, and you are doing an excellent work in the domain, and now you will be taking over as the President of PhD Chamber, one of the national apex oldest chambers of the country, and we are shortly going to be seeing him from 1st of October on the driving seat. So thank you so much for sparing your time and your effort and all that you are doing for the chamber. Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank Mr. Kapit Thwaja Pratap Singh. I've already thanked him for his valuable remarks and for giving an insight of the embassy, the Indian embassy in Nepal, as to what initiatives they are taking. It's a very vibrant embassy, where when we were setting up this India-Nepal Center, we had several meetings with the embassy there as to the charter of the India-Nepal Center, how it should emerge, what should be done, and how we must go ahead in tying the industry, business and trade together between India and Nepal. Ambassador K.V. Rajan, who has spent more than 5 years as the ambassador there, was very formative and very forward-looking, and he gave out the niche sectors which were very important for both the countries, including the our borders with the adversaries, where it is going to impact really extensively in case the balloon goes up in the near future. And things are not very forward-looking at that end. But this collaboration with Nepal is going to go a very long way with our country. And government, we all expect that the government of India and the state governments work together in enhancing this relationship in a much forward-looking manner, and do a lot of joint projects together, which has always been done in the past for so many years. Both India and Nepal have common history, which was already explained by our president. And both the armed forces of the countries have worked together, have given their heart and soul together for their countries. When during the British Raj, during the World War I and World War II, and they were the biggest and the known fighters who have excelled in these wars, both in India as well across the globe. So with these words, I would like to close and thank each one of the panelists who came here. I hope I have not missed out anybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for sparing all your valuable time. We hope and pray that these conferences get converted into physical B2B conferences. We look forward to B2B meetings from both the business enterprises from both the countries. We wish to expand our relationships much more after post-COVID-19. With these words, I once again thank. I would like to make a mention of our chair of the session and the co-chair of the session, Ambassador K.V. Rajan, the chairman of INC, and Mr. Nirvana Chaudhary, chairman of the INC at Nepal and vice president of CNI. And MD Chaudhary Group, without their close support and cooperation, this webinar would not have been successful. Also, I want to thank the Rashtriya Bank of Nepal, as well as the NSBL, which have and CNI for partnership in this webinar, for enhancing the cooperation for MSMEs in Nepal, and also for the earlier organized remarkably successful webinar, Strategizing Economic Rebounding and Cooperation in India and Nepal, on 30th of April this year, Exploring Hydroelectricity Potential in Nepal on 23rd of July 2020, and this webinar. All the three virtual conferences were held by hundreds of participants from the government, from the industry, from the media, think tanks, the economic diplomacy fraternity, and all the members and former presidents of PhD Chamber. With these words, moving forward, we are trying our best to keep India's inclusive growth momentum on. In the process, we are very much open to engage with the industry fraternity in Nepal and to carry forward the mission of creating shared prosperity in the South Asian region. Thank you, each one of you, and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much. It's been a great interaction. Again, I would like to repeat our thanks to our chief guest, Sri Mahavir Prasad Adhikari ji, the governor of National Nepal Rashtriya Bank, yes, and the guest of honor, Mr. Sushil Bhattaji, the CEO of Investment Board Nepal, and all the dignitaries, the eminent panelists. I think very few times one would see such a galaxy of such eminent panelists. And I think it's been our sincere contribution to the working of India and Nepal together in the betterment of MSMEs in the face of this COVID pandemic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.